Are you looking for a review of Disney Jollywood Nights that's not full of clickbait phrases and gives you all the details on how Disney is already adding a little bit more tinsel to their newest holiday offering? Then this is the show for you.
To all who come to our happy place, welcome to the No Guilt Disney podcast, where we have no guilt about all things Disney.
We are three Disney fangirls who probably know more about the Disney parks than most grown women should, and we are perfectly okay with that.
We are so okay with that. But if you've been around before and you've heard us say this a million times, then you know how just okay with that we are. And also how we tend to be too these days.
Yes.
Listen, again, just to clear the air, like if anyone's wondering, nothing's going on. There's no beef, no issues, no probs, no nothing. It's just literally logistics. Like we can never ever get together because everybody's life got really kind of impacted from this summer all the way through. I mean, work, school, life,
Taylor
travel. I mean, the Taylor Swift of it all, y'all. I mean, she's just killing me over here. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's just been hard to get us all three together, but we are all still a team, and we'll see what happens in the new year about trying to get together more often because that's our hope. We prefer it. But anyway, Teresa, please introduce yourself to those who are new here.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Teresa, and you can find me on all socials at Gertie the Dino.
Santa Gertie the Dino.
Santa Gertie the Dino,
yeah,
who we will be chatting about today.
It was exciting. That was a highlight. That was a highlight.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, and our other co-host is Jane. She did not attend any of the Christmas parties or any of the Christmas festivities, so she chose to sit this one out since she really just didn't have any constructive discussion to throw in there with us, which is good because that's what we want to give you is some constructive information and feedback. I am Patty Holiday. I am the owner of the No Guilt Universe, which was coined by a watcher, a listener of the podcast. So I appreciate that. I've just run with it. I love it. But that is the No Guilt Disney blog, No Guilt Fangirl, No Guilt Life, No Guilt Travel. I also have a yard card business that's No Guilt. Like it's all under the No Guilt umbrella. And that's me. I basically live with a philosophy of you love what you love and there's nothing wrong with that and you should not feel guilty or let anybody make you feel bad about your love for Taylor Swift. Okay or whatever it is that you happen to be fixated on in the moment. Mine is currently a Taylor Travis like tunnel vision, but that's not what this podcast is about. We're going to talk about Disney today, specifically Disney Christmas. Teresa and I went to the very first Jollywood Nights experience at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Not only was this the first of the season, it was the first one ever. And it was
it was very apparent that it was their first one ever.
We
will say that.
It was. And we did make a point to try to talk to like managers and leads and people that we saw walking around with the sticks. I don't know if you guys realize that, but like if you have a gripper that picks up the trash, that means like your seniority or something. I don't know. But those are the types of people that we ended up talking to during the course of this event that we went to. So we got a little bit of detail about all of that. But before we dive into that too deeply, I want to just throw out a couple of observations. I gave myself the gift of Disney Christmas this year. Teresa did not go with me, but the night before I went to, I think it was the second, Mickey's Not So Scary. Mickey's Very Merry, excuse me. We're into Christmas now. Mickey's Very Merry Christmas. Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party. I went to that one on Friday night, and then we did Jollywood the next night. And then Sunday morning, I jumped on a plane and went to Disneyland so I could experience Christmas out there. For anyone wondering, Disneyland doesn't do parties, which I think we said this on the Halloween discussion that we had, one of our many Halloween discussions that we've had. But I walked into Disneyland and was just like, yep. Frankly, guys, Disneyland I felt like it does the holidays in general better. And there's things that I like about it more than what you get at Walt Disney World, particularly the fact that all the things that you get that are special at Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party are included with your regular park ticket at Disneyland. So the special Christmas fireworks, you didn't have to have a special park ticket. Anybody could watch that. The I think it's called Christmas Fantasy Parade, which is adorable. That's also for you. The flip side is, though, I will say, Disney World does the parade better.
Which I did get to see
Yeah.
because this weekend when we were, or this past weekend when we were
Yes.
there, it was also when they were doing a lot of the filming for the Christmas special. And that Sunday, so the night after, or the day
Hmm.
after, we did Disney Jollywood Nights. I was able to go and at 11 a.m. see the Christmas parade, which I've only actually seen in person once before.
Okay.
So it was really exciting to get to go see it and get to see it as like a daytime parade coming down and being with just the energy, everybody who was there excited about the filming of
The
it.
filming of it. Yeah, but that's an experience. Like mark off your bucket list
Right.
that you were there. So come Thanksgiving morning, when they air that, you'll be able to say, "Where am I? Where am I?"
Right.
Everybody look for Teresa. So yeah, I had a ton of Disney Christmas. Teresa got double dipped Disney Christmas too there, Disney World Christmas. And but the main focus that we wanted to talk about today is Jollywood. But if you have questions about Disneyland during the holidays, if you have questions about Mickey's A Very Merry Christmas Party, let me know. If you're a longtime listener and you remember, I had a disappointing experience last year and definitely said, not never again, but said, I prefer Halloween. Well, I still prefer Halloween. That still stands. But I will say that this party felt like it was run a little bit better. I think there were some changes that they made that I appreciated. And also it was not during a hurricane. So I stayed
That does
dry.
help.
Really, really absolutely makes a huge difference. So I stayed dry. But I do have some posts. I will include them in the show notes and this blog notes for anybody who wants to read anything about those experiences. I will be updating those throughout the week. So come back and look for those links if you need them, or come to our Facebook group and ask me for any questions that you have. And I'm happy to give you my 2 cents on it. But Disneyland was beautiful, was awesome, was amazing as always. But I really, really enjoyed it at Christmas. And the party was good. What was not good was what we're going to talk about tonight, which is Jollywood Nights.
And I'll say, we said not good. Like there were definitely some things about being at that first party that I think legitimate criticisms. If you've been on the internet the last week and a half and seen anybody talking about it, you'll see I saw a few phrases saying like, the night from hell, that it was a disaster.
The worst
I
experience I've
Worst
ever
experience.
had through Disney, like
Right.
all kinds of dramatics. Like, y'all sit down because
And
you're
like I said,
exaggerating.
to get to the main point of it, I had a good time. I think I understand why that's how people express their opinions. And I will say, I think if people hadn't been vocal about some of the challenges of the first night, we might not have seen the changes they have made. Last night, as of recording this, last night was the second party, and they did make a lot of improvements. Well, if it was based on feedback, I would have given as well. So I do think it's important for people to have shared what their struggles were at this event, but I thought a lot of those struggles were very over the top, or the way people were expressing them. It was not a night full of horror, in my opinion. However, we will get into some of the things that did go wrong that first night and things that they did improve for the second
Yes.
party, things that
Yes.
we would still like for them to improve. But I do want to get started off on the things that we experienced at Disney Jollywood Nights that went really well.
Well, first, I want to chime in real quick on the negativity in the sense of what would have had to happen for it to have been the night from hell, like the worst experience ever for you? For me, it would have been things like standing in line for an hour for food only for them to completely run out and early on in the party, like, the first hour of the party, they were out of food. That would have been unacceptable. That would have been something that I would have said, no, 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 like, no. Outside of that, I'm not I'm not sure that I can think of anything that stands out as something that would have just like made me that angry and that upset. So what did you have anything that would have really triggered you or really gotten you upset to have expressed that kind of opinion? Because by the
Yes,
way, the food was plenty. They did not run out of
they did
anything
not, but
that I
and that
saw.
was something that we did have concerns
We
about.
did.
The way that we kind of prioritized our night
Hmm.
was there were certain things we really wanted to do. Nobody should be shocked that for me, the Gertie cookie was one of the things I really wanted to get done, and I actually did have concerns that oh
Yeah.
no, they might sell out. So that was one of the very first thing we did was we got that just to make sure I had it. But in terms of things that would have made it, a really bad night to the point of, requesting a refund, I had heard horror stories about a previous event for the villains. They did a villains event, and I just heard that it was complete chaos in terms of lines and people not really being able to do anything, being overcrowded. And I think that, to your point, talking about being in lines and then not getting to the end of that line and not being able to do the thing you wanted to do. So whether that is food, whether that's a character, whether that's one of the shows, for me, I always feel like, to have a good event, I just want to feel like I got the most out of my time. And I think if it had been standing in lines and then not feeling like what you stood in line for delivered, or that you didn't actually get to experience it, for me, that's what would make the night bad. And some of that some of that I think sort of did happen. But again, we saw them pivot, we saw them make improvements. But so for me overall, it's a night that the whole party theme was about, dressing up, getting glam, being there and just kind of experiencing things, having Santa Gertie and Muppets. I got to see and do a lot of things that I really enjoyed. So I think, like, for me, it would have taken a lot to be a really terrible night, and
Right.
it wasn't.
Agreed. Yeah. For me, and I think this is also important, if you are still on the fence, if you haven't bought tickets but you're going to be in town, or if you are looking forward to maybe possibly next year, should they bring this party back, which I
I
think
think
it,
they should.
when I
I'm in
left,
favor.
when I left, I said I wouldn't go back. Like, it was a one and done for me. But with seeing some of the changes that they have implemented, I will again tell you the things that I was interested in, and the reason I wanted this ticket so badly in the first place was, not sound like a Gen Zer, but it was about the vibes. Like, the vibes were immaculate. The vibes were fun. I did think that people's, no offense to the influencers and the media that were there, that y'all were really negative and were really harsh in our mellow. Like, anytime we ran into any of you guys and we started talking about something, it was all negative. But if you talk to just a regular person, a regular guest, they were having a good time, I think, in general. Hindsight, you can always say, oh yeah, well, that kind of sucked and that was kind of bad or whatever. But I definitely think that in general, most of us were there for, like, the dressing up and and to point out the dressing up thing. We kind of went with like a retro Christmassy kind of thing, but you didn't have to. Like, we saw everything. We saw people who were like in ball gowns, in just really cute outfits, themed outfits. We saw people who just wore, like a Christmas sweater and leggings, and they were completely comfortable in that. So I, you could have done anything, I think, for this. But for those of us who like to have an excuse to dress up and go to a Disney park and take advantage of some of the unique backgrounds and locations to take pictures, that was like my priority. That was my most interested. So on that level, I got what I wanted. Like, that was good. That was good. Is that worth paying $160 for? No, right? Like, I mean, when people always ask, like, is it worth it? It all depends on where you put your money and what you think is worth it or not, right? So I'm not trying to say, like, oh yeah, that made it all worth it for everything. No, but it was part of what made it enjoyable for me, and I know it made it enjoyable for you, because Teresa loves that kind of stuff.
Yes, like, you cannot take the theater major out of the girl that will always
Nope.
live there.
Yep.
So give me a chance to put on a themed outfit and I'm happy.
Exactly.
So I think before we dig into, like, all of the details of what we thought, do a quick recap of what Disney Jollywood Nights is. I think a lot of you probably are familiar about it because we've talked about it on the podcast before. But if you have no idea, quick recap. So Disney Jollywood Nights was the new hard ticket holiday event that Disney introduced this year, kind of as a way to provide just a more adult party as an alternative to Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party.
Now, they didn't sell it as that. They never said adult part, like,
Right.
don't
They
bring
didn't
the
say, like,
kids.
that it's not for kids,
But it
but
was very obvious in what the offerings were and how it was kind of marketed, that was the vibe. And when we were there, I didn't see a lot of kids.
I did not see many kids, and I think part of that, if you think about doing the way that they did tickets, there was not a child priced ticket. If you
Yep.
went, the tickets were ranged. So there's 10 parties total between November 11th and December 20th, and the tickets range between $159 to $179 based on the night that you're going. And I think that was one of the indicators that people had that this was not necessarily something for the whole family to do. I mean, it could be, but because they didn't have a child price ticket, that was, I think, a little signal to being like, hey, this is great for like an adult's night out.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely think it was like, and if you are a family that you're trying to decide Jollywood Nights or Mickey's Very Merry, Mickey's Very Merry. I will just give you that answer right off the top of the bat. I just feel like that there definitely felt like more people and it was a more crowded party at Mickey's Very Merry, but I definitely think that it's more geared towards younger kids as far as like an overall. I mean, I was a single adult and having a grand time, so kids of all ages, of course, but I definitely would if I was going to take my younger child, I'd probably take her there versus Jollywood Nights. My older kids would have thought Jollywood Nights was great. They would have had a blast. They're all teens and early 20s, so they would have had a great time. So that's just kind of to give you some feedback on age range-ish. If you're looking for some direction, that would be my choices. Mickey for the younger kids, for like your tweens. But once you hit teens and up, you're probably good to go at Jollywood if this has any interest for
Yeah, I
you.
think so. And a lot of that we'll talk about. I think it's based on the layout of the event too. Everything at Jollywood Nights felt very consolidated, even though the park was open. Like you could go to all areas of the park, but it was very condensed into specific areas. And I think especially for something like Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, where there's just more to do if you're not focusing on the party thing. So maybe there are lines for some of the party events that you want to do, but you don't feel like waiting in that line. There's a lot more you can do around Magic Kingdom and still kind of feel like you're part of the event. It
Yeah.
was everything at Jollywood Nights really felt like it was condensed to, the Echo Lake area, the Hollywood Boulevard, and just kind of like that central part, even
Hmm.
though Toy Story Land and Galaxy's Edge were both open. We never made it back there
We
because
didn't
of
even,
how
yeah, we
condensed
just, they,
everything was.
and we stayed until I think we left like 10 minutes before the end of the official party time because it started raining. So Teresa and I were like, we're good. We don't need to stay for Jingle Bell Bam. So we did leave before that show went off, but it was because it started raining on us and we just were not up for staying in the rain.
Yes, and that would be, I think, the fact that there was not really a rain contingency was one of the things. One of my recommendations to kind of think about that. I actually would have liked if they'd maybe done the fireworks twice rather than just at
Hmm.
12:30 a.m.
Agreed.
Especially when Jingle Bell Jingle Bam hasn't been seen at Walt Disney World for quite a few years. So I was a little disappointed to miss it, but it just wasn't a big enough draw at 12:30 in the morning in soaking rain. I wasn't willing to do that. But so that was one of the special entertainment offerings they had. They also had two shows. So Disney Holidays in Hollywood, which had the Muppets, Tiana, Belle, Mickey, and Minnie, and was really kind of set around the retro variety shows that they would do in the 40s. So they did performances, but they also had a few between the performances when they were like kind of changing the sets. They had sponsors. And I'll talk about one of those sponsors when we get to that aspect. But they also had What's This, which was a Nightmare Before Christmas sing along. They had two themed areas. One was around like a Latin street fair, and the other one was a Twilight soiree at the Tip Top Club. And we're going to have a lot to say about that one. And then there were a couple of rare characters around. So you had Chippendale's Rescue Rangers, Phineas and Ferb, and Powerline Max. And they had the Fab Five. And so those were the main characters that had been advertised. And then there was the Jazzy Holidays at the Hollywood Brown Derby, which we did not experience because of some technical issues, but also we'll have a lot to say about that one as well. And then lots of photo ops. There were photo ops everywhere, including a couple that were, I guess I would call them more interactive. So
Hmm.
one had a boomerang style where you did something and then it kind of like, rotated back and forth. They had another one where you could do a big slow-mo or a celebratory style that had the camera on an arm that would move all over the place. And those were actually a lot of fun. And I think one of the things that hasn't gotten talked about as much is that as part of the party ticket was photo pass was included. So any of these photo experiences you wanted to do, whether it was those more interactive ones, I had one of my favorite magic shots of all time, which was with the Muppets. These were all included as part of your party ticket. For your annual pass holders, you might already have that as, as part of your annual pass, so it's not as big of a selling point. But if you are somebody who's not an annual pass holder, did not purchase photo pass as part of your trip, I think having that included in the ticket does add some of the value.
It
And I think a
definitely,
lot of the people we talk to are annual pass holders, so that
yeah,
maybe didn't work into the is it worth it category for them,
right.
but I do think that that adds some value, just knowing how many opportunities there are for photos at this event.
And they
And
were
to Maddie's
rare.
point,
Yeah, they were rare the photos, and they were
yeah,
interesting. And the photos are not included at Mickey's Very Scary, the Halloween or the Christmas party at Magic Kingdom. Neither one of those get photos, so this was different.
yes. And then there were a lot of attractions were open.
Hmm.
So you could go to Slinky Dog. Rise of the Resistance did have a virtual cube. You could go on Tower of Terror. And again, kind of thinking about photos being included, I think that does include your ride photos at
Hmm.
this event. So we did do Tower of Terror, and wanted to do that, in the fancy outfits. So overall, like I said, that's kind of what the event offered, especially night one. And like I said, I had a great time, and I think we'll start off with talking about what all of the highs were. What were the things that we really enjoyed about the event? So, Patty, we'll start with you. What was the thing that you enjoyed most about Disney Jollywood Nights?
Being with you, Teresa, that was my favorite part of it. Yeah, I never get to like hang out with you anymore, so that was fun. I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the dressing up aspect of it all. And then I think what I like the most in situations like this, usually it is the walk on rides, but because we were trying to get some other things done, we never even, I mean, we rode Tower of Terror, but that was it. We didn't even, oh no, we did ride Mickey and Minnie, didn't we?
Yes, we before the event started. So you can, I guess we should say that. So the event officially took place. It started at 8:30 p.m. up until 12:30, but you could get in with your or with the event ticket as early as 7, I believe. And
They
our
were
approach
letting people in around 6:30 though.
6,
So
yeah, 6:30,
and I
6:45, and I
saw that last night as well.
yes.
So if you're planning to go to this party, keep that in mind. If you don't have an annual pass, if you don't have a backdoor way in like we did, because we went in like at 5 o'clock, I think.
Yes, we wanted to go in early because we wanted to see specifically what the experience was like if you were doing check-in from inside the park, which was one of their challenges.
Not
But
good.
it was not that
You're
was a
so nice.
challenge.
She's all it was a challenge. I'm like, it was a disaster. That one I will say was just like, come on, guys, like do better. But so yes, that's something to keep in mind. If you are planning on going, you want to be in line by 6:30. If you want to get in that early, go ahead and get there early enough to be in line by 6:30 because they might start letting you in. I saw
Mhm.
reports last night that 6:30 they started letting people in. That also adds a little value to your ticket if you get in a little bit earlier because you can ride rides or take pictures, or you can't take Jollywood Nights pictures. But like we went and took pictures with Santa Gertie. Like we went and
Right. Yeah,
did,
we went around and did a few photos, just the general
yeah,
photo ops, especially if you want to get some of the photos while it's still tentatively light
yes,
outside, just with
yes.
winter getting dark earlier. So yeah, I was happy that we went and took a few photos around, just with the photo pass that was there, and it also meant that if we took those photos early, we didn't necessarily have to wait in those lines
Mhm.
later on when people started coming for people who are only there for the
Who
party.
were only there for the party. Yeah. So I did like all of the photo ops that they gave. I thought the characters were interesting. Characters that we didn't, I knew were there, but like we didn't even make it back there. Frozone and Edna Mode were also available. And I haven't had their pictures in a bazillion years. But we just never got to that end of the park. We just didn't go that way. So I liked the pictures. I liked that they, while they're not my fandom and I didn't truly care about it, I liked that we had a Muppet show, so a centered Muppet show, and that we had a Nightmare Before Christmas centered show. Again, neither one of them are like worth standing in a big long line for, as far as I'm concerned. However, the lines were huge for both of these events, and people were so excited and seemed to come out of them with positive things to say. The only thing I will say is the Nightmare Before Christmas, people were like, that was odd. That was weird. Teresa and I went to that. We just chose not to stay for it.
Yes, that
I can't
was
remember what we decided. I think we went and took pictures instead. Like we went and
yes,
we
that
did
was getting
characters.
it was getting towards the end of the night. I think
Mm-hmm.
it was the last show that they were doing, and I think at that point we did go in and we got into the theater, but then we were just kind of waiting for it to start, and I think we had just made a decision that there were other things we wanted to try and do with the
Yeah.
rest of our time. So like that was when we went to the more interactive photo areas because we hadn't even made it to Animation
Mm-mm.
Courtyard by this point in the night. So I think 11:45 was the last showing. Party ends at 12:30, so we just wanted to try and get in as much as we could.
So
But
we
I'll
can't
say
say if that was great or not, but I liked that these were offered and that it seemed to be good for people. And then the last thing I liked was the food we ate.
yes.
That
The,
so that those are like those are my highlights. Kind of generic highlights, but those are my highlights.
Yes, and a lot of mine are similar. So for me, just the overall concept of the event, getting dressed up, doing some of those photo ops, just being in, I love old Hollywood. So a
Mm-hmm.
party that's kind of celebrating that and having areas around that concept is really just up my alley. Talking about the shows, like Patty said, Nightmare Before Christmas is just not something it's fine, but it's not, I don't have the level of fandom for it that a lot of people do. But I did hear everybody who went to it loved it, including people who are big Nightmare Before Christmas fans. Like I heard only positive things about that show. We did go to the one Muppets, the Muppet Show. And so for me, I should not be calling it the Muppet Show because that was my one critique of it was that it
Yeah.
could use more Muppets, but I just feel that way about everything. Everything can use more Muppets. So it's not, don't use that as the basis. But the show itself was really, really good. I'm going to get the name of it again. Disney Holidays in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
The music was amazing. And I actually really enjoyed that it was about a 30-minute show.
It was
So
long.
these shows were not, you wait in a long line and then you go in and it's over right away. I thought the length was great.
Mm-hmm.
However, that does bring some of the concerns about the overall timing of the event, being able to do everything, which we will talk about in a little bit. But for me, I thought that, I thought the show was fantastic. The performers were so good. And talking about they had those the sponsors in between as they were changing the sets. At one point, it was the sponsor of the show was it was they were doing a cooking show, and it was latkes with launchpad. And so I was just like, I just loved that they were thinking about all holidays, and
Yes.
I was
Yes.
like, okay, we now have a newly confirmed Jewish character, launchpad. There you go.
Launchpad
In case
McDuck.
anybody was
Who
wondering.
knew?
But yeah, so but like I said, just the way that they kind of put the thought behind that and made that as like an element of it, doing those audio sponsors that they used to do for those old shows. I just, to me, that really spoke to how much time and effort they were putting into kind of creating this and what they wanted to get out of it. So I thought the show that we saw was really good.
Mhm.
And then, like Patty said, the food was fantastic. We did Fairfax Fair, which had popovers. So one was like a turkey popover, and the other one was
With
the
all the
sides,
sides.
which I know Patty didn't like that one as much.
Not
But
as much.
the turkey popover was really good. Obviously, the Gertie cookie. I think the cookie itself, not the best cookie I've ever had, but it was adorable. It was tasty, and that was the first thing we did. And one of the reasons, again, to make sure we had a chance to get that Gertie cookie, because I would have been devastated if we hadn't. But the great thing about doing that was when we were in the line, there was a lot of cast members around who had been working on the events, and because that was in Echo Lake where a lot of the central stuff was happening, there were just a lot of cast members around there waiting for the party to get started. And we actually had a chance to talk to, her name is B, and so she was I believe Patty, you're saying she was like the head chef who was kind of coming
Yeah.
up with all of the food, or overseeing all of the food that was part
So
of this event.
Teresa had scouted out. She went up front to find out something about, I don't
I
know, what
wanted
are
to
the
see,
lines? What's to see
yeah.
what one of these lines were. And I discovered the Gertie cookie line had just been formed. So I jumped into the line. And there was a lady behind me that when this woman, this cast member walked up, and she had a chef's jacket on, I guess is what they're called. And she started talking to her, and she had questions about something. So she started, and then through that conversation, people were like treating her like a star. It was so adorable. Like they were taking selfies with her, and they were like asking her all kinds of things about the food. And that's when she said, "Yeah, I'm actually the head chef for all of this. I've been working on it for a year, and I came up with all of the recipes and whatever." And she actually took a phone call at one point where she had to describe how to dress the plate, for a certain meal. And I was like, that's so cool. Like you just don't have those kinds of experiences, right? And so, and I've never actually, I take it back. I have had times where I've talked to the chefs for at Disneyland. I had an experience where I got to like hang out in the kitchen at Napa Rose once while they were cooking. So I did get to talk to chefs then, but it was just an unexpected moment. And it was one of those things that like, we were like, okay, this is fun. This is great. And then we were in line for Gertie cookies. So that was great too. But yeah, she was awesome. And then Teresa came over and took off with her and like had a whole conversation with her. So that was good.
Yeah, so we went over to talk and like get a photo in front of Gertie,
Mhm.
and so she had actually pulled over another chef named Kat, who Kat was the one who specifically had worked on the Gertie cookie itself, and kind of was
Yeah.
the one who brought that to life. So I have a photo with the two of them, and it was just really exciting for me for two reasons. One, to thank them for doing that,
Hmm.
because anytime Gertie gets included, whether it is, putting a Santa hat on her, making her a cookie, making her a part of this event that people were excited about, I want to show appreciation for that, so they know that people genuinely do notice when they involve some of these things about the park that maybe are not as highlighted as I always want them to be. But also, it was just really exciting to see how excited the cast members were and how much
They
they were
were.
anticipating things getting started. So they were not opening anything until 8:30, like official party time.
Yeah.
So we were in line, I want to say like maybe around like 8:10, 8:15 was
Hmm.
when this conversation was happening. But you could tell that they were all just milling around, waiting for it to get started, waiting to see people's reactions when they first got things. Like they were really paying attention to the guests. And that was, to me, just a nice moment. And I think that's why I was getting so frustrated with some of the reactions that people were having after this first party, because I understand where frustrations were, but like if you had seen just how excited these cast members who had put so much time and effort, B had said she had been working on this for a year,
Yeah.
to know that they were, they just put so much into having this event become a reality. And I think a lot of the challenges were logistical and operational and things that could easily be fixed. And it just, to me, I just felt bad that these cast members who put so much into it, how they might be feeling after all of these broad reviews of the event, when they worked so hard. So
I
it
yeah,
got me in the feels a little bit.
I that let's all remember, like giving criticism and explaining things when we're unhappy or whatever, that's one thing. But it's not just Disney the corporation back there. There's like real people
Hmm.
who are doing the boots on the ground, the hard work of all of this, and to kind of keep that in mind and not be total jackholes when it comes to some of these things would be nice. You can certainly express frustration and whatever. Like I'm on the phone with cast members quite a bit, obviously for my travel agency, and I always have to watch myself because I can get spun up very easily. I don't know if you guys know that about me, but I can get spun up really easily, and I always have to say, I know this is not directed at you, so please don't take it that way. I just have to, vent my frustration as to what is happening. And they're always like so appreciative that I'm not yelling at them. But yeah, I had that same feeling, Teresa, like at the end of it, because we also had that conversation when we were in line with Fairfax Fair. We talked to the manager of, I think, Fairfax Fair or maybe food on that street. I'm not sure what his title is. Apologies, but he was very generous with his time, and he had a whole
Hmm.
conversation with us about what was going on and what they were excited about and what we should try and what he thought was the best items and that sort of thing. And again, they were all excited, like truly, just like honestly, I don't think it was for a lot of them. I think they were just giddy that this finally was coming to fruition. And then to have people, influencers, just crap all over it, who, by the way, were all there for free. Listen, it just again, I'm not saying don't give criticism. I'm just saying like be
Right.
aware of how you come across maybe when you do and when you say these some of these things, because I do think that, you know, that's something that we forget in this day and age, is that there's real life people with real life feelings on the other end, and you can just do it more constructively.
Yes. And on the topic of being constructive, I think this is a good segue into the some of the areas for improvement,
Yeah.
and specifically starting on the things that we already know that they have improved. Because I think
So you've
there's
got to remember, we went to the first night.
first night,
And so the
yes,
first night, from what we saw last night, which was only the second night, it looks like they took some of these things that Teresa and I were saying as we left and had the conversations this week, that like, I wish they would do this. I wish they would do that. I wish to da 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 da. A lot of those things I think they were hearing from other people
hmm
and they acted upon it.
yes,
Guys, like, I mean, we can all be mad about how bad the first night was, because for a lot of people it was bad, and I'm not trying to tell you that you were wrong in thinking that, because absolutely there were some big flaws, big issues, big challenges, as Teresa so nicely puts it. But the good news is that they did listen and they course corrected. And that was my biggest concern with, there's only like 10 of these parties.
hmm
And I was like, are they going to have time to course correct? Well, as it turns out, maybe they were kind of smart. They treated that first party as like the preview party, maybe. And then they had a whole week to work on fixing it for this second party. So hopefully from here on out, it just gets better and better, or smoother and smoother, or whatever. And if you still have concerns or whatever, you know, definitely talk to guest services. Do that immediately. Don't leave and think about it 3 days later. Like, let them know what concerns you have, because that gives them the most time and the best opportunity
right,
to try to work through it if it's something that can be worked on. And that was what Teresa, when we left, that was the one thing that like stood out when I had the conversation with Teresa. I was like, I left thinking like, it was fine, but I don't need to pay for it again. Like you know, it wasn't something that I'm like, every year I'm going to Jollywood Nights. I'm sold. I was like, I'm good. You know, did it once, I'm good. But Teresa was like, everything that I have problems with, I think can be corrected, and can be
yes,
corrected in time to save the season. And so, to your
yes.
point, let's talk about some of those and what our biggest issues and concerns were.
Yeah, and Patty, you alluded to it already. So the first one was obviously check-in. The first
Mm-hmm.
party night, there was one spot for in-park check-in, and that was over at the Mickey Shorts Theater. And because we had gone into the park so early, I know they said they were starting that check-in line at 6:30 for people who are already in the park. I do think they sped it up a little bit when they saw how much that line was going, so they started it slightly earlier than that.
Yeah.
But if you had gone into the park, I think, and gotten into that line around like 6:45, you might have been waiting up to an hour in that line to get your lanyard and your wristband, because that was the only check-in spot. And I think when people saw the line, they got in because they were like, oh no, I have to get in now because I'm going to miss part of the party. I did talk to people who got in the line maybe around 7:45, and they were in and out. But I think there's only one check in line and you see people getting in, you're going to start getting anxious that you're going to actually miss some of the events of the party.
It's the way our brains work. Yeah, that
Yes.
it's just like, hurry up. We gotta get, this is a line. We can't miss this line, right? Like, what's that line for? Like, we got to go get in it. So yeah, that makes sense. And that is something that is different than
Yes.
what Magic Kingdom does when they do their two parties, the Halloween and the Christmas party. There are multiple locations on the inside for you to get your wristbands. And that's what I expected. I thought that we would come in and we would come across this first one and it would be this massive big long line. And I'd be like, Teresa, I bet back at Toy Story there's another one. And we would just carry on to the back of the park where we would breeze in, breeze out with our lanyard and our wristband, and it would have been great. No, they had one, and it was a long line. It was probably the longest line that we stood in all night. And we
hmm
got in line about 6:15, and it was already like full. Like the queue was already full when we got in at 6:15, and they were telling people 6:30. So yes,
Yes.
they did have to go ahead and get started earlier than I think they planned to, because they weren't prepared for the people, which also just makes me laugh, because I'm like, y'all trained us to be this way, Disney. You should know how we work, right? Like this is how we work. And so that was always so bizarre to me that that was the response. I really did think that was weird. But yeah, so that was my first biggest issue.
Yes. And so the way that they did pivot, so there now are actually two check in locations if you're already in the park. One was over by Muppet Vision 3D, and the other one was over at Star Wars Launch Bay, which makes sense, especially for the Launch Bay because of it's indoors and you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of move people through. And so reports last night where people were waiting a matter of minutes at
Yeah,
those two
10 or
locations.
15 minutes to get through their lines.
Yeah, so
Easy.
like I said, so that seemed to be a huge improvement. The way that they adjusted that worked really well. Another critique was around the lines for food. Patty and I mentioned that we did Fairfax Fair. That was really the only food we got because that line was exceptionally long on the first night, and we'd kind of heard that in other areas of park, some of the other special foods, the lines there, or even the special drinks for the Tip Top Club, the lines for food and beverage were
Yeah.
extremely long. And because it with being a special party, there was no mobile order as an option. Even and I know Patty the night before they had a somewhat glitchy. They were trying out mobile order for the Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, which didn't go 100% smoothly, but they were trying. And when we were in the line for
Yeah.
Fairfax Fair, that was something that they had mentioned was they just in terms of IT operationally, they couldn't quite figure out how to get that off the ground for Disney Jollywood Nights.
So what we're talking about is I went to Magic Kingdom again. I'm an annual pass holder, so I went in early. I didn't even stand and I got my wristband inside the park, easy peasy. Those are my biggest tips is if you have a ticket already, then go ahead and get your because the line to get in through the party line was outrageously long when I walked up at like I don't know, maybe it was 4:30 or so. So it was early, but it was still but it was anyway, it was long. It was a long line and I if I don't have to do long lines, I'm not going to do long lines. So I went ahead and bopped in with my annual pass and then got my wristband later. I also remembered from the Halloween party that something happened with mobile order, like they cut it off at a certain time or whatever. So I went ahead and pulled up thinking, well, I'm going to go ahead and put something in now, not expecting mobile order for the party. I just expected it like to get mobile order because I was in the park, right? But when I scrolled down, it said there was like different time periods. One was up until the end of the night, which was 6 o'clock that night. Then the other one says big red letters, basically, do not click these because this is only if you have Halloween if you have Halloween tickets or Christmas. God, I keep messing up my parties. If you have Christmas tickets. So it gives you like this big warning on the mobile order site, like only pick one of these times if you're staying for the Christmas party. So I was like, cool. So I clicked that and I clicked one that was like at 7:05. So it was right after the official start of the party. And this was happening like around 6 o'clock or 6:15. No, it was sooner. It was more like 5 o'clock. It was like 5:45, I think. It was 5:45. Anyway, so I did that, and the way mobile order typically works is you wait until you get over to mobile order and click, "Hi, I'm here, start my order." What ended up happening was they went ahead and made my food right at 7 o'clock, even though I was on the other side of the park. I had not said, "I'm here, I'm ready for food," or whatever. So there was this glitch in that sense that I think what happens is the restaurant sees the orders are there and they're just like, well, we're going to go ahead and get started on these, right? And so they did. The negative to that Christmas party situation was that I ended up with food that had been sitting under the heat lamp for 20 minutes. It was still okay. What I had bought was fine, but that wasn't I wasn't expecting, and I felt rushed, like to pressure to go and get this food, before they threw it out. And anyway, so when we talked to back to Jollywood, when we talked to the Fairfax Fair manager, we asked him what's up with mobile order, and he was just like, there was no way to differentiate between like a regular day guest and a party guest, and you guys want party exclusive food for your party ticket, right? And I'm like, yes, but also like were that many day guests stuck around for like an extra hour and a half just for the
Well,
food
right.
to mobile order? Because the party didn't start till 8:30. But the
And the
park
park closed
closed
at
at
8.
7. Oh, I thought it
No,
closed at 7.
no, I think you could get in as early as 7, and then that 7 to 8 hour was the like
That was the mix
intermingling of
in.
like
Okay.
regular park ops and
Okay.
closing. So I think there was, yeah, so 8 o'clock I think was when the park officially closed the
Anyway,
evening.
I just honestly think very few regular day guests would have known or would have thought about or would have tried to take advantage of anything. I don't. So to me, it was like, I think the better thing would have been to do mobile order to help with these lines than to worry about if a day guest gets a popover that they shouldn't have gotten. You know what I mean? Like in the end, it's that big of a deal. To me, it's not, but maybe it is to other people. I don't know. Depends on how you feel about that, I guess.
Yes, and that's not something that, that's one of my recommendations for next year. Hopefully they
Hmm.
can figure that out and adjust. But reports from last night were that food and beverage lines were much better. There are a few things I saw that I believe added to that. One was, again, on the first party night, they held off on opening anything related to the party until 8:30, even though the park closed at 8. I did see last night somebody who had been in line for Fairfax Fair. They did open Fairfax Fair at 8 o'clock, so they did have make sure spreading out some of this stuff a little bit longer. I saw that first night for the Tip Top Club, the bar back there, you could have a wait for up to an hour just for some pre-mixed drinks,
Just for drinks, guys. That was
just
all
for
that you were in
drinks.
line for, was just for the drinks.
Yes. And I think last night there was only one bar with two bartenders. The first
Hmm.
night they did that, I was waiting in line with some friends when they were getting it. And I heard last night it was about 15 to 20 minutes if you were waiting in that line. So I don't know if they added a second bar or they were just able to speed things up. Maybe fewer people were getting in that line because they didn't realize that line was only for drinks. I think there was some confusion about that
There
when the party
was.
started, whether the Tip Top Club was that line was to actually get in because maybe they had a certain capacity limit. But no, you could just walk in and out of the Tip Top Club, and the
With
line was just for the drinks. So
was
I'm glad
just
I
for
asked about
drinks.
that.
Yeah, I am too. I did see last night that they ended up adding an extra line. So there was two lines with two registers and two bartenders in each line. They also costumed the bartenders as bellhops, which I
Yes.
don't think they were costumed the first night. So that's just like maybe a little extra cutesy perk, even though obviously bellhops aren't going to be bartenders, but whatever. We're not. It was cute. It was cute. So yes, they did add a whole extra line to make that go a little bit smoother.
Yes, and same thing they did that with the Gertie the dinosaur cookie also. They
Yes,
added, rather than having one line for everybody, they did two lines. One if you just wanted the cookie, one if you also wanted it with the soft serve. For opening night, they were not ready with the soft serve by the time we were there, which was fine. I was there for the cookie.
we were there for a
But
cookie.
it
Yeah.
seems like, again, they found ways to deal with some of what these long lines were. And so I think that helped with people getting able to, number one, to get their food quickly, but also to try more than just one food location. That was one of the things that I was a little disappointed by. Was we really had to we picked the one that we wanted to try the most, which were the popovers at Fairfax Fair. But we didn't really get to try any of the other food.
And
I
we
know, and a
should
lot of
have.
locations, a lot of the quick service locations did have special food.
And
So I
we should have, because I heard that the food over near the Latin Street Fair
the at the ABC
was
commissary, I heard that food was really
phenomenal.
good.
I heard it was really, really good. So again, if you're planning on going, if if the popover is not your jam, take a look at I think they had enchiladas and they had empanadas and they had, I can't remember what all they had, but I heard reports just fabulous, just fabulous, fabulous food over at ABC Commissary. So that's a very good option that probably had shorter lines.
Yes. And then we'll stay on the topic of food and IT glitches. I think the biggest struggle a lot of people had with the first Jollywood Nights was around the jazzy Hollywood at the Hollywood Brown Derby. That just did not go the way anybody expected. We had gone early on just to find out, what the what the process was going to be like, and they said starting at 8:15, you would be able to go request a time within the walk up list to request a spot, and then they would start calling people back at 8:30. So what happened? We actually did not get a time, but from talking to people who did, basically everybody who was near the restaurant, like in the vicinity, you had to be close enough to it to request that walk up time, which makes sense, but that was not really communicated.
Yeah.
But everybody who did successfully do that all got a return time of 10 to 15 minutes. every single person who managed to get that request in, that was their return time, which obviously was not realistic. And I think even after they did cut off, so like they did cut off people being able to make requests, but even after that, you never knew when you were going to get called back. It stayed and showing on your screen as 10 to 15 minutes. And they did keep calling people back. So people who got that reservation were eventually called to go, but it was definitely one of those hard to plan your evening around, not knowing when you might actually get to go and eat there. And I think the other challenge people had was once you were there, they were supposed to be, the jazziness of it was a single piano player. But when that piano player was on his break, there was no like additional element to make it
Yeah.
jazzy. And that was a challenge, I think, again, with some of the entertainment offerings around also, was that when those performers were on break, there just wasn't something to kind of back it up.
What we
But
read in the descriptions made it feel like it was going to be more than what they provided.
mm-hmm,
And so for anybody who was really kind of angry about this is where I will say I think you're justified. This is where I'd say if it was me and I was like, really wanting like a refund from that first night or whatever, it would have been over the fact that I actually thought this was going to feel like a jazz club. I felt
mm-hmm,
like Tip Top Bar was going to be like, I don't know, more of an exclusive thing, like whatever, when literally it wasn't. It was just we were hanging out in the courtyard and you could come and go. Now, that being said, that band was phenomenal. And I
yes,
absolutely could have brought my food and sat there all night and sat there for an hour and would have enjoyed every second of it because they were just that good. But again, the first night we were there, we were also there with all the media and the influencers who have to listen, I get it. Like you have to get your video, you have to get your shots, you have to get. So my experience when I went back there was nobody was dancing,
mm-hmm.
nobody was like vibing or enjoying it because there was this big mosh with everybody's cameras out, like trying to get footage. That being said, that I think later parties when more normals are going, sure, people are still going to video and they're still going to take their pictures and whatever, but it's just not going to be the same. And I hope that there's more like interactive dancing and enjoying that space because it was a cool vibe. Like that was my favorite location. It just what I just I don't know what I expected, but in reading it, I thought it was going to feel more like of a like special location, not someplace that we walk through every
And
single time we ride Tower of Terror.
yes, and that was something we had talked about. Like that was something we were concerned. Like, oh, are we going to be able to get into
Are we going to be
this?
able to
Like,
get
are they
in?
going to be at capacity? And that was
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about that. If that's something you've
Oh,
been thinking, don't like you will be able to go and experience that if you want to. And I was thinking that this was a missed opportunity for this year, something they could do for next year. Like Disney should probably have like people planted, like cast members planted at these areas to kind of start
100%.
the dancing, either there or with the Latin Street Fair side where they had the
Yes.
performers again. And I think first night, like Patty said, you're going to have people who, for they need to record, they need to get
Yep.
some of this footage, and I get that. But yes, I do wish that there were people who are actually there, like in the spirit of those themed areas. And it would have been great to even see if they had people dressed up like the characters from Tower of Terror, like
It would
the
have been
people, the
so
hotel guests,
fun.
kind of had
Yes.
them milling around and like. But yeah, I think
Yes.
something to get people dancing and moving around.
Yeah.
So that's feedback for next year. Something that they could try to just have those areas be the vibes that they're going for. But one thing that they did improve was how people actually are getting reservations or able to enjoy the Jazzy Hollywood at Hollywood Brown Derby.
Hmm.
So they completely changed what this reservation process is between night one and night two.
Yes.
And they have printed this everywhere. Like they reprinted the programs or the maps to kind of say this.
Which also, I don't, and I haven't seen the new map in its entirety, but let me tell you something. This map, I'm just going to
So
show.
hard to read.
Yeah, I'm just going to show it to you. It's absolutely stunning and gorgeous. Like I really appreciate what we were going for here, but in the dark, I couldn't read this, much less Teresa had
That
no
was the very
shot.
first thing I said to Patty when we got it. I was like, I can't read this. This is
Not,
not, this is useless to me.
yeah, absolutely none of it. Again, stunning and beautiful, but it was really hard and really small to read. And the first night, I just kind of pulled it up on my phone to see if that had changed. And it does look like it might have changed. But the first night, I also wasn't able to find like a party guide on the app, like they are doing with the Mickey's parties over at Magic Kingdom. That I think was new this year, or at least it was more functional. It was more updated. I actually used the maps in the party guides this year, where in the past years that I've gone to these things, I haven't ever used those maps. So I was expecting that for Jollywood, and it really wasn't there. But when I looked it up just now, it does appear that they put a little more functionality to it, so you can use your phone. But again, they also didn't make it like easy to get to. You have to like go through 7
It's
steps before
very
you
hard
get
to
to the map.
find. I did look last night, and so it did show you like where food was available.
Yeah.
Again, you can't mobile order, but it showed you all the food locations. If you did click on the menus for those food locations, though, it was just the traditional menu.
Yeah,
So
they
you
didn't
do
give
need
you
to
the
know ahead
special
of time,
menu.
do
Yeah.
your research to like where the food is that you want to get. But it did have the right time, and it did not show where characters were, which we'll talk about characters
We'll talk
shortly.
about characters in a
But I do want to say,
minute.
so basically, so what they did for Jazzy Hollywood was now, rather than starting off with only, or rather have only be the walk-up reservations, tables are now available first on a first come first serve basis. Up until they reach capacity for that first seating, and then at that point they'll start doing the mobile walk up. And they were saying that even if like you check at one point and the mobile walk up is full, to keep going back and checking again because some additional things might open as the night goes on. But yeah, so they did completely change that, and I think I saw people who had started lining up around 8 o'clock last night to be able to get in that first seating. It seemed like it went much more smoothly. I think the downside to doing this, and the reason I was fine with us skipping the Hollywood Brown Derby, was because this is a 4-hour event, and doing a sit down meal that takes a big chunk of time out of it.
That
And
would be
I
my tip to skip personally, especially since the only thing that was, I mean, they did give you a different menu, but the only thing on the interior that was jazzy was the piano player. Like, I don't know. Again, if there was some characters or something happening to give us a little bit more to watch or to experience or to feel immersed in the Hollywood Brown Derby time period of that golden age of Hollywood, I'd be all for that. It would be worth dinner and a show to kind of watch what was going on, or whatever the situation was. But yeah, to your point, I also didn't had no problem with skipping that. Just one quick shout out: we do have somebody who's on our Facebook group who is also a server at the Brown Derby. She is our Francisco on site, and Carol, hi. And she told us that that first night was very hard on them, but it did sound like going forward was much better, and that everything, like, please come visit Carol. Like, if you
yeah
happen to see her, tell her you heard her name on the No Guilt Disney shout out, and that we love her. But yeah, that was the only reason we did pop in, because we did try to see Carol, but she wasn't there at that point in time, so we missed out. But yeah, that whole situation got much better for somebody who wanted to sit down and eat and enjoys Brown Derby, which it's a cool location. Carol also mentioned, which I guess I didn't realize, but she said there's only 50 tables in the restaurant. To me, that doesn't sound like a very big restaurant. So also keep that in mind with capacity. That's all, I
yes,
think,
and I
one of
think
their
when we
struggles.
when we spoke with them, they were seating both inside but also in the lounge area.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of that was to add a few additional tables. Like the lounge area for the Hollywood Grand Derby is not large,
Mm-mm.
but it's a couple extra tables when you're trying to get as many people in as possible. So this is something that if I go again in the future and they do this, I would like to try it at some point, but it would be dependent on the party being a little longer, if they adjust, what the actual entertainment is inside. I would consider doing this in the future, but for the first one, it was just not a priority. But I am really glad to hear that this was something they realized quickly. I think it was one of the biggest pivots they made, was kind of how people were actually getting to the restaurant. I'm glad that they were able to change that so quickly.
Yes, I agree with you. That was one of the biggest complaints that I think we saw out there, was just in general, long lines everywhere, which you're going to get some of that, which I do think they took steps, at least with the food situations, to help with those lines. We'll talk about characters in a minute. And then this was another big complaint that people had, was getting into this location. Like you couldn't, it was weird. Here's another thing, Disney, I know you're listening because you always do. I don't understand the reason for the virtual queue for Rise of the Resistance at this party, because I've been to after hours events at Hollywood Studios, and we didn't have virtual queue. You had standby line. That's a people eater. Like, why wouldn't you
What,
have given that as an option? And
and especially
also,
with it being so far away from where
yeah,
everything else was happening. Like
space your people
we
out,
got a virtual
right?
queue spot, but we didn't even end up going to
No,
it. But yeah, I think that virtual queue probably wasn't needed for Rise
it's
of the
not needed.
Resistance.
And that's why I'm really just kind of like, why did you guys turn that back on? That didn't make any sense. When I've been to an after party event where it was walk on, and it was great because it literally was walk on. Like it was listed for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That's how much time it takes you to get to the queue to finally get to the first, ride portion of the attraction, because it's a big old queue. But it was that seemed like a missed decision, unless there's something operationally with Rise, which I know it did go down the night of our party, which Rise goes down kind of frequently. So, but also in my head, I was like, but again, that's even more reason not to mess with the virtual queue, just to have standby so that if it goes down, people know they can just come back later when it comes back up and get back in line. You don't have to worry about like your virtual queue disappearing, or just anyway. It was a weird choice, that I think also could have alleviated some of these lines. That I would
Mm-hmm.
like to see the virtual queue for Rise of the Resistance for this party go away. I don't think it's needed, from my high level of operations in theme parks. But from what I could tell and from what it felt like, I think that there's a lot of people that do pay money for these after hours events in the hopes of riding rides with short return times. That delivered. That is absolutely a solid reason that if you are looking at this and you're like, but I love the rides and I want to be able to get on these things, this is a solid reason to do that, because all of these wait times, even the night that we were there, they were short. They were 5-10 minutes, in part because we were all
In line for other
in
things.
line for other things. But even last night, same thing. I saw reports, from some of the Facebook groups and some of the social media stuff that said the same thing, that like maximum they stood in line for something was less than 20 minutes. Everything else was like 5-10 minutes or straight walk on. So these are all
Mm-hmm.
the big rides like that you could just like walk on and enjoy. So that is still like, in the end, that's one of these reasons why you go to Disney World for these, and you spend the extra money is so that you can ride rides, right? So that is definitely there. It's an opportunity for you. If you didn't like any of the other stuff, go ride all those rides and get all of them in and enjoy, because you could, like Slinky Dog, it's hard to get on Slinky Dog these days. You could have ridden that one over and over again. But yeah, the virtual queue thing, I don't know why they did that.
Yeah, and I'm assuming if that was they thought that the demand would be more than it was.
Yeah.
But again, the challenge, because the party was only 4 hours and lines were so long, I think, especially after that first night, it was just hard. If you were trying to see the event specific offerings, to go do things like the attractions that you can do at any point in time. Again, it's all about what your priorities are for the events.
Absolutely.
We were really focused on the
The
what Jollywood
shows.
Nights had to offer.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
one of the, I think, going back to all of these lines, one of the things we had talked about, my personal feeling was that this event needed to be longer. I do still feel that way. But other people, who we were chatting with, were saying, yes, but that's one of the things that they didn't like was, to them, felt like there wasn't a lot to do. I think it was just a bad balance of, because there maybe wasn't necessarily as many things to go around and see and do. lines got longer for what was available, and it just made it hard to experience everything, even though maybe there wasn't a lot. So one of the things that we did not really do any of was see characters, and that's because those character lines where the special rare unique characters that they had around Echo Lake, those lines were easily an hour at the point that they
Yeah.
opened. I remember seeing like the Phineas and Ferb line was just so long. Powerline Max was the one I really wanted to meet because I have met Chip and Dale in the Rescue Rangers outfits. I've never met Powerline Max, but even that one, again, it was just kind of to me, it was tough. I would rather have gone to see the shows than to stand in line for a character. I think where they had the Fab Five, they were off over an animation courtyard, which again, we didn't even make to the very end of the night. But one of the things I had been saying was it would have made a lot more sense to have more characters or to spread these characters around to other areas of the park. So that way it just didn't feel like everything was so consolidated and you were kind of getting people around. And that was, I think, one of the very first things I noticed that they had changed was they did add more characters.
And we pouted about it because
Oh,
both
there's
of us,
two in
both of us were
particular
like,
for different reasons. And I say in the characters, they did start bringing these characters out at 8 o'clock also.
Yeah.
So again, me talking about I wanted this party to be longer, even though the party still says it starts at 8:30. Go get there by 8. Be there a little early because they do seem to have like sneakily extended the hours of this party.
This nice little soft launch that you could get into lines for something and be prepared like sooner. So again, it might benefit you for some of these rare characters to make that choice to go to the park sooner than you were thinking, and go ahead and pick the one that you want to get in line for first. And there were some good ones.
I can tell you who that would have been for me. So we mentioned earlier that, first night check-in had been at the Mickey Shorts Theater. They did move check-in. And do you know who was there at the Mickey Shorts Theater instead? It was Santa Duffy. Not just Duffy the Bear, it was Duffy as Santa. And
so
to
I
me,
have to do a callback because you probably didn't watch the last episode that I did with Jane about the 5K, where she trashes Duffy. So here's the yin and yang of this podcast, guys. Teresa was so over the moon over Duffy. Jane and I are like,
yes.
Jane definitely feels some sort of way about like, get rid of Duffy. We're done with Duffy. I'm like, whatever, Duffy's fine. But no, I'm not going to jump in line for an hour on the race course for Duffy. Like, that's how I feel about Duffy. What? But Santa Duffy was so stinking cute.
He's Santa. He's Santa.
And cute.
I have a soft spot for Duffy because by sheer coincidence, not planned whatsoever, I happened to be in Epcot on the day that he made his very first appearance ever at Walt Disney World. Like, I just happened to be walking around Epcot and walking around World Showcase, and he was out there for his first meeting. So for me, I'm like, I have a soft spot for Duffy. I'm not as over the top as some people are, but I love these original characters that they have created throughout the parks. And Duffy, he's just so cute. And him as Santa is just one of the most adorable things ever. And because that was, I think, the first thing that people saw that was something that they had changed about the event on social media last night.
Yeah.
Like, the memes were glorious. All of the commentary about Santa Duffy being out and people being so excited for that. It was fantastic. But so that was the first one that was the first moment I really felt like, oh, dang, I'm so sad that, I feel jealous and a little left out that we did not get to have Santa Duffy. So you're welcome, everybody. For those of us who were there that first night, gave feedback, and the rest of you now have the Santa Duffy of it all to enjoy.
I hope Dalen watches this video. Dalen is a friend of mine that I've had on my old podcast a couple of it's been gone for years now, but No Guilt Fangirl podcast had a podcast at one point. Anyway, she left us a message under Jane's slamming of the Duffy, and she's like, the Duffy slander, ladies. And I was like, so when Teresa and I were texting last night as we were both watching what was going on with this, I was like, justice for Duffy. Okay. So we have our Duffy lover right here. And yeah, last night, that was the first character that both of us went, that would have been, I would have even stood in line for Santa Duffy, and he's not my guy, but he was so cute. So adorable.
And speaking of some other characters that sometimes on the podcast we disagree about a little, there was another character in a little Santa outfit And that was Santa Stitch. And again, I talked about Stitch as one of my favorite characters. Again, Santa Stitch is so cute. So Santa Stitch he was around the quarter from Indy, kind of going over towards Star Tours, and that was one that Patty had thought she was going to be meeting Santa Stitch the night before we went to our party at Mickey's Very Merry
Yes.
Christmas party.
I
He
was
was
so hot, y'all. So I don't know where I read this, where I made it up. Maybe I just assumed. I don't know. But when I saw that Stitch was meeting for Mickey's Very Merry Christmas party at the Tiki Room, I had visions of Santa Stitch. And I was like, I like Elvis Stitch. He's my guy. I don't like Stitch as a character, but Elvis, come on. I mean, that's the cutest. I just love that like collab of Elvis and anything, but Elvis and Stitch made me so happy. So I was excited that I was getting Santa Stitch. And then I get there and it's like vacation Stitch. He's like wearing
the
a
Hawaiian shirt.
Hawaiian shirt. Like, no, not even like a Santa hat with this Hawaiian shirt. Like, I was hot. I was seriously, I think I might have texted Jane
You
and said,
did. You
like,
texted me.
I texted
Yeah.
you. I was like, why did I even waste my time here? I was so angry about it. I was so annoyed. Again, I get a little weirdly hot about weird things. But anyway, so then last night, I was like, I heard Stitches out. If it's Santa Stitch, and Teresa was like, yeah, I know. Well, I'll wait and see if somebody posts a picture. And then all caps comes across, it's Santa Stitch, Patty. And I was like,
Yes.
so
So Santa Stitch, the other characters, and I will say it was nice that the other characters I had out were like holiday. They were wearing their holiday
they
outfits,
were, yeah.
but so they were alternating Jiminy Cricket and Pinocchio near Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway.
And
They
cute
also
little holiday gear. Like, it was
cute
adorable.
holiday outfits like their scarves. They also had Snow White and Dopey
Mm-hmm.
over near Muppet Vision. I think those were the ones I did see people calling out. Somebody spoke with a cast member, and essentially they said that they are going to be bringing out more characters for the other events, but it's not necessarily going to be these. So don't if you're on the fence and you hear like Santa Duffy, don't necessarily get your ticket right away just because of that. I would like to think that he's one that they would bring out consistently, but they
Yeah.
did say that they're not sure which characters are going to be out at these nights, and that makes complete sense with this being a late edition. It's going to be based on staffing and who is available, who they
Yeah.
can add on. But so there might be other unique rare characters
You
in
might
their
get
holiday
something
outfits
different.
later
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So
And that is something that both of us said. One of the like line issues was if they just added a lot more characters and advertised it on the app or on the map, like it would have, I mean, I have a blog post that says where you can find the characters, but to Teresa's point, that I'm gonna, I'm gonna have to go and update it and say this may or may not, your mileage may vary depending on the night, depending on staffing or whatever, because this is a new blah 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 blah. However, I'm gonna make a list for you guys so at least you have some idea of where to go and where to prioritize. I'll link that in show notes for you. But that was something that the night that we were there, I also wanted a list. And that was my priority, was just to know where the characters were. I knew we weren't going to have the time to stand in line for any of them, but I did want to know where they all were for information purposes, so to let you guys plan for your later parties. And that's something that I wish that they would update on the app, or at the very least on the map, have it clearly listed. Because I don't think characters by name. I think there was just like, oh no, it is. Okay, they do
I
have
think, yeah,
characters
for
by
the
name.
advertised
Yeah, they did.
characters,
But it was
yes, I think they advertise, but again, these are not going to be advertised characters because it's going to just
exactly, it
depend
could
on
change.
who they
Yeah.
can get.
Yep.
The one thing I heard that people say that they would like, and again, it makes sense with this being a last minute change, was that for those characters who had been added in different locations, that the lighting wasn't great.
Okay.
And again, that makes complete sense because they were not necessarily expecting them to be there. So they didn't have the way that the advertised characters have these cute little sets and decorations. The other newly introduced characters are just going to be roaming around where they can find spots for them. So I did hear that the lighting was not wonderful, but again, I think they have kind of learned, hey, adding these characters is a great benefit. So hopefully next year they'll have that lighting, or even for later parties, just have some like additional lighting around those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I did hear that the advertised characters still did have pretty long waits. And again, that makes sense because they're the ones on the map, they're the ones people are aware of, and nobody knew these other characters were going to be around unless you happen to be checking social media or walking by them. So I would keep that in mind too, that I think having these additional characters, it's more things to see and do, but if you have your heart set on some of those other advertised characters, those lines still may be, you might have a bit of a wait. So think about what your priorities are for this event, whether it's the shows, whether it's the food, whether it's the characters, and just knock that out first. Get in that line as soon as you're able to, because I think kind of coming away from the event, that's how you determine if it's a good night or a bad night. Like, did you get to do the things you wanted to do? And because of the timing, because it is only 4 hours, just make sure you kind of pick that number one thing first, know that you've gotten it done, and then you're not going to be concerned about the
Mhm.
rest of your night, like, oh, I have to do this and this, and then I'll fit in, meeting power line max later. I think going in with a good plan for this event, and especially now, we didn't necessarily have a plan because we didn't know what to expect. I think now that you've been able to see one or two of these happening throughout social media, going in with a good plan, I think, is the number one way to make sure this is an event that you're enjoying and not a disaster.
And I would
There,
also tell people that if you are doing your research now for an upcoming party, be mindful and look for things that have been updated post second party. So look for information that is dated November 18th and later, because I think the November 11th one is just going to give you information that is not going to be as accurate as what is happening now. It was accurate for the time, 100%, but I do think a lot of changes has happened. As somebody who writes a blog and like tries to stay up on these things and updates them, we all try to update like immediately when we see things. Your mileage may vary on how well we do that. Because if you went to my site right now, things are not completely updated because I was traveling all last week and I just haven't had a chance to sit down and work on it. I'm doing that. Don't worry. By the time you see this, and the links will all be updated because that's what I am going to do today. But that's just something I want you to kind of keep in mind is if you're looking for information, try to ascertain if it's a first night experience or a second night experience or whenever the next party is, whatever, later on. But that's just something I think in this particular case is going to very vastly be different from first to second night because it was so different. They really did improve and they changed things. So keep that in mind. The other thing I want to tell you about, like the lines for the shows, with both shows that we saw, we got in line late. By the time we got into the lines, they were loading people in. Okay, so we did not like stand in line at the front of the line and wait for 40 minutes to finally be let into our show. We literally got in as the line started moving and started loading. The Muppets line, we were down, that's so at Sunset Boulevard. We were loading on Sunset Boulevard and it took all the way down there. And then we went like, we queued all the way back. And I remember at one point I turned and looked at Teresa like, what is happening? Have you ever been in this line back here? And the joke was, well, Beauty and the Beast show happens here. Does anybody ever, like, have you guys ever experienced this line for Beauty and the Beast? And all four, there was 5 of us. All 5 of us were like, no, because nobody waits in a line for Beauty and the Beast. Like you just walk up and you go into the like theater. It's like, this isn't a thing. So first of all, hi, you need more Muppets in your park because the Muppets were the draw. Like people were really excited to see live Muppets. I'm sure there's a cost that goes into this, but
right.
this is y'all need more live Muppets.
Well, and Imagineering is responsible for the Muppets now. So
Yeah,
Imagineering, put in more Muppets, but don't change Muppet Vision. Do
no,
not change.
it's
Don't
adorable.
touch Muppet Vision. They
Yeah,
did.
no,
I
no,
did
no.
see that they replaced the seats finally.
Thank
So the Muppet
goodness. Those
seat,
were so gross. Those were so
but
disgusting.
yeah. So don't leave Muppet Vision alone. Just build more around it.
And also, I want the Muppets to come back to Liberty Square. That was
Yeah, that
so
was a fun
cute and
show.
so fun and so perfect. So, yes, more Muppets in your park. And I'm not even a Muppet girl, but I appreciate the Muppets. As a Gen Xer who watched the Muppet Show as a child, like I do appreciate them. And I do think my kids and my family would love to see the Muppets more frequently. They're timeless. They're just so great. So my point is that we were in this huge long line but we had just walked up to it. We did not spend 40 minutes waiting for this line to go in. I chose to sit in the way back because I knew I wasn't going to sit for the entire show. I had to go to the bathroom. Basically, was this the story? I'm not afraid to tell you guys my life here. So I knew I wasn't going to stay for the whole thing. So I sat in the way back, like up on the riser section. I could completely see the stage. I could hear everything beautifully. It was adorable. I don't think there's really a bad seat in this theater. So unless you just absolutely are that first row kind of person and you need to be up front, I don't think you need to waste your time standing, like queuing up and being in line for 20, 40 minutes, however long it ended up being for the show, unless it is just so important for you to be like right in Miss Piggy's face, right?
Yeah, and we were able to time it pretty well again because it's right across from where Fairfax Fair is, and that
Mm-hmm.
was the first dining place that we knew we wanted to go get food. So you could very easily go to Fairfax Fair, get your food, and then just kind of keep an eye
Yeah,
on when the line's about to start moving, and then jump right in after you eat. So that's how we organized it. And again, I think this is where we did have an overall better experience than people because some of it was luck. Like
yeah,
some of it
yeah.
surely was luck, but we are also kind of making sure that the order that we did things complemented them. So we were able to try and minimize lines where we could. We did some divide and conquer.
We did
So
some
when one of us was in line for
conquer. Yeah,
food, the other one was going checking out the Tip Top Club. So I think we had a good approach to
yeah,
it.
for sure.
But yeah, I think that's one of those things. Like Patty said, you don't have to wait in that full line unless you want to be right up front. And if you do, understandable because I also want to get as close to a Muppet as I possibly can. So no judgment.
The other thing too that I was, I think it was while I was sitting waiting for the show to start that I was scrolling and I saw on Facebook you can follow PhotoPass on Facebook. They probably have all the social medias. I just am a Facebook girly because I'm old. And they listed that they had this magic shot with the Muppets. So I screenshot it and I sent it to Teresa and I was like, I'm going to go find this for you so that was also another criticism that I will say is that, that wasn't advertised in advance. And so it wasn't until like the party was an hour and a half going on that I even knew there was this opportunity to take a magic shot with Muppets. But then secondly, that first night, it said that it was, in front of Tower of Terror, like on Sunset Boulevard. And I walked up and down that street like 4 times, and there were no PhotoPass photographers out. It wasn't raining. There was nothing like going on. I couldn't figure out, like, y'all just posted this. Like, you just sent this out, and I'm here. Where's the photographer? Ultimately, one shows up and gets this huge long line because, of course, you want a picture with the Muppets. I mean, who doesn't want a picture with the Muppets, right? Huge long line. And I was like, again, do you guys not know your audience? Do you not know your people? And if you don't, please listen to our podcast because Teresa is your person for this
Yes.
particular party. And if you know anything about listening to our podcast or watching us, you know how, like, it would just clue you in that she's not alone. A, she's not alone. But B, she absolutely like had to have this picture. So I was like on this hunt and I was like, that's fine. I will stand in this line while she finishes the show. I'll let her know to come join me in the line. And then at that point, they did bring out a second photographer. And so that again, they like adjusted and they said, we're working on it. We're working on it. We're getting a second photographer. But in my head, I kept going, did you guys really not know this was going to be a thing? Did you really not know this was going
Right.
to happen? That's kind of like the thing that blows me away with some of this planning is, as much as we have been around Disney and we've done special events and I've purposely go to the special events to try to give feedback and to try to give the experience to people. It just blows my mind that they constantly underestimate our excitement and our interest in certain things. And so I guess again, Disney, we're here for you. Just listen and we will give you all the feedback you need.
Yeah, and we said this a little bit at the beginning. I am very happy that they did listen to feedback and they did make adjustments right away.
Hmm.
I think a lot of the times, especially when a party is only 10 parties, it would be easy enough to be like, oh, okay, this is just a wash. We've been seeing, if you're paying attention to the film industry at the moment, there's a lot of folks who are putting a lot of time and effort into things, and then you have upper management being like, nope, we're just going to cut that now.
Yep.
So I think that we're in a weird time. We're in a weird time, but I
Weird.
was really happy that a lot of like the feedback that we've been talking about that is operational, easily fixable, like they've listened and they're adjusting that already.
Hmm.
Even after the party that we went to, when Patty was saying that for her this wasn't something she thought she would be doing again, I had said, my reaction was, yeah, I actually like, I think that there's a good concept here. I think all of the problems I have with it are things that they can improve on,
Yep.
and I'm going to see what happens. But for me, I was like, this is definitely a party I would go to again, not like not twice in one season, but
No.
like I would go to again in like a future year if I saw that they had made some improvements. And it looks like they've already done that. So I'm really hoping that reception for the remaining nights of the party is positive, so that this is something that comes back and does give people an alternative party to Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party. And if they're able to build on what they've already started, I think some things, like I do still think that they need to increase the length of it, like make it a
Hmm.
5 hour party rather than a 4 hour. I think that will help a lot.
Oh, also the mix-in was awful.
The
Like
mix in was really bad.
the day guests and the party guests when we were all there, it was a lot. That does happen at Magic Kingdom, but I feel like Magic Kingdom's a bigger park. It has like it's spread. I don't know. It's spread out a lot more. Think so much of us Jollywood people just stayed in the Jollywood centric areas instead of going out and riding some of these other attractions
Yes.
that we could have ridden. So I think that's something that I wish that they would close Hollywood Studios a little earlier and let the party start earlier. Don't make this a party that goes off until one
No,
o'clock in the
yeah, don't
morning.
don't make it, because that was
Don't
because
extend it. It was
that was the
late.
main reason we missed Jingle Bell Jingle Bam, was because it had started raining,
Yeah.
and we just didn't want to. At that point, it was late night. We're already tired. We didn't want to be waiting out in the rain. So I said if they did, I think having just more thoughts about rain in Florida, like more contingency plans. I think doing the fireworks twice, like I would think that's a good idea, not only saving it for 12:30. One thing I was really surprised that they didn't have, because we had seen it the night before. I was meeting up a friend when Patty was getting there for Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, so I was in that little mix-in time, and they had these free water stations,
Oh,
around.
right.
I think that was
This is
something
in Magic Kingdom. Yeah.
at Magic Kingdom, yeah. So they had free water stations at Magic Kingdom, and that was something that, especially with as bad as lines were that first night for food and beverage, I really think that it would have been nice to have had some free water more easily accessible. And I know that people have made that comment when you think about like the after hours parties, and you do get like water, soda. You have some of these other hard ticket parties where you get some extra snacks.
Yeah.
I think that, even at the Halloween party, you get free candy. The Christmas party, you can get some
Cocoa and
cookies.
cookies.
So I
Yeah.
think that's something, again, I would like to see for next year. Just some kind of complimentary
Something.
food and beverage, but like, even if it's just water, like give people water if lines for food and beverage might
Bare
be a little
minimum,
longer.
you need water stations. I thought that was very smart to do. However, I think my two things that would encourage me to buy a ticket again for the next year. I want another experience of some sort. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what that is. I'm sorry. I don't. That's not helpful. I know, but I feel like there still needed, like, we had two shows, but if and we had this
Two
one
shows and like two
dining
themed
and
areas.
two themed areas. Well, three themed areas, kind of, with the street fair, the Latin street fair. But that one was literally just the band. Like, there wasn't anything themed. Like, I didn't see
Yes,
any
yeah.
decorations over there that like made me go, "Oh, street fair, let's party it up." Like, so I want expansion
Yes.
in some way, somehow, with those things. I think you have the opportunity that maybe even back in Toy Story Land, it's already decorated a little bit for Christmas. Like, you could do something back there. Again, I don't know what, but you could do something back there again to also spread out people. But I think I want another experience of some sort, a dance party. I don't know, but something, swing dance back there, right? Like, that would have been fun. Just something different going on, one other thing. And then, yes, to the plussing of giving us like an extra food and drink type thing. Just a FYI, I got this cute little ornament from Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, along with my cookies and my cider and my cocoa. And we got coasters from Jollywood Nights. Oops, I'm holding it upside down. Jollywood Nights. And these are they're wooden coasters. They're cute. It was surprise. It wasn't advertised, I don't think. So that was our little like takeaway that I thought was nice. But I do think that plussing it up one more time would be to offer some kind of, even if again you just do cookies and cocoa or something like that, that's fine. Like you don't have, it doesn't have to be something super creative and crazy, but I do think that that's something for the price of this party that you should offer, or the free snacks like they do for the after hours events where you can walk up and you can get free sodas, free water, free ice cream bars, free popcorn. Like find something. You guys are so smart and so creative out there. I know you will come up with some cutesy little like glitzy glammy way of selling us, not selling us, but like giving us away these fun things. But I think that needs to be added to this party for the value, because the other parties you do get stuff. This one you didn't get anything and it was the same price. And there's no kids prices. So, you know, that so that I think is what would interest me to come back. Also, definitely I'm big on the characters. I love what they did last night. I love that they added those, and those in particular. There's definitely people who will love all of those. So I'm happy with all of that. I love that the rides were like easy to walk on and walk off if that's what you wanted to do. But I think that's what I need for convincing to come back next year, is just a little more something, and definitely some more. I mean, we're going to help. Obviously, I'm going to write a blog about it, and I'm going to write information about details and put that word out there. But I think more communication directly from Disney for folks that don't listen to blogs, don't read blogs, don't listen to podcasts would also be helpful, because I think some of the things were just like those photos. We knew there was going to be special photo opportunities, but I don't think we really knew where they were or what they were going to do. And so at the end of the night, when we got to them, Teresa's game for any photo, anytime. So she jumped right in line. I sat it out because I was like, I'm done. I'm tired. I'm not in the mood anymore for photos. But if I had known about it earlier in the night, I absolutely would have gone and like had some like the moving arm photo and stuff. That they were cute. It was a cute little video that you got out of that.
Yeah, and I did hear somebody mention that I think there was some slight intentionality of not sharing all of this stuff in
Okay.
advance. But even talking to some cast members, like there were a few spots where we saw people walking in, we're like, "Oh, what's this?" And like the cast
They
member
didn't
couldn't
know.
clearly answer it.
Yeah.
So and again, some of that's just training. But I think with it being the first night, I think that was a struggle for those of us who were there. Was we were trying to figure out the layout of everything, and for me in particular, the map was not helpful because I couldn't really see
You
it.
couldn't read it.
And I think so. I do think now that now that the media bloggers, influencers, podcasters have kind of been there and are able to provide that information for people.
Yeah.
I think anybody going to the later parties will have a better sense of what they're getting into, or even people for next year, if you can kind of go back and be like, okay, this is what happened last year. So I think, and this is my general opinion, was like I would go back and do this again. I will never do it on night one, and I'm kind of my now general opinion of special events. Like I don't think I'm ever going to go to any of these on their first night
I
ever
try
again.
I try not to go to night ones purposely, and I I guess you could consider me an influencer or whatever because of the blogs and the podcast and whatever. But even I don't like to go on those opening nights because of what we experienced. It was, I don't want to say it's insufferable because everybody's doing their job. Like I am not hating
Yeah,
on anybody that is making a living doing this. I make a living doing this, like, right? So that's not it. But for an average person who just wants to try to like enjoy something, it definitely colors your experience. And I guarantee you folks, night two, it's not like that. Oogie Boogie Bash. Funny enough, we went to night two of Oogie Boogie Bash this year, which turned out to be the night that they had invited all the media. So Jane was like, "Oh, that worked out well for us." But I think Oogie Boogie Bash was like spread out in such a different way. We saw them. we saw Color Me Courtney, for example, taking pictures and stuff off to the side. She was so cute. But I never felt like they were in the way or that they were like doing work while the rest of us were just there to enjoy it. Like I never got that vibe there. But yes, that's going to be my biggest tip, my number one tip to anybody who wants to do any special events in the future. Do not go to first night. If you have the opportunity to pick a second night, you will have a better time, I think, for various reasons. One, usually they are able to course correct whatever the problems were the first night. But two, the media does impact things just because they're trying to do their job. Again, we're not mad about them. It was noticeable for this event. It was very noticeable. In the past, I know that they've done for some events, Disney will do a cast member preview / media night or a media night totally separate. I wish they had done that for this experience. I think you and I would have had a different experience if
Mhm.
that had been the case. I also think they would have gotten some of that feedback early on. But then again, maybe they wouldn't have unless they did a full like cast member preview because part of it was the crowds, was the people.
It
And so
was, yeah.
if it's just media, then there's no lines for anything and they're not going to be able to tell you that feedback, right? So in a way, like having the media come to a real life party and they had to stand in line like we did. They did not like get pushed to the front of the line for food. They did get to circumvent and have special seating for the shows, but for the food, they were standing in line just like we were. At least that's what it appeared to be to me.
I think, well, I'll say for some of the food because I know
They got the
they
cookie
got
ahead
there
of
early, so they
time.
get the Santa
Yeah,
Gertie cookie. I'm not sure if they had any other food or beverages ahead of
that's
time
true.
just to
That's true.
sample.
That's true. That's
But
true.
yeah, like if they wanted to see everything or
Mm-hmm.
get, they did have to wait in those lines. And again, I think that we were having a side conversation about, I think again, operationally there were some things that need to be fixed, but I think because so many of these people are there to report on
Mm-hmm.
what the offerings are, you did have more people trying to get in every possible line for food and beverage, and I think that kind of added to so I
Definitely.
don't know for the changes for people who were only waiting a couple minutes last night if how much of that was because they added more registers because they kind of figured out ways to move people through faster versus there just being less people who had to get into every food line so they could try a little bit of everything.
I think it's definitely that combination factored in for that disaster of the first night. And again, like if you hated the first night, we're not saying you're wrong. There was definitely some problems and definitely some concerns, but we also think that they listened and give credit where credit is due. They have definitely made some big changes. Everything that I saw on social media was much more positive with last night's party. So that makes me happy for various reasons. A, Disney listens. B, people maybe felt like they got their money's worth, which is very important. They had a good time, very important. And then the cast members probably had a much better time without a bunch of people like yelling at them or being angry or being annoyed because it's such a disaster or, everything was so bad. So all of those reasons, like I'm happy to see what we saw last night. I'm glad we decided to record this today after, we could see if there was any changes. And so that's great. The other thing I will also tell people is as you're listening to things, like don't always just rely on social media. Please Google. Please just Google and try to find like more in-depth sources because you may come across, one person's angry tweet and then like 3 times later in the thread they might come back and say, oh, I've changed my mind or I realize or whatever. But sometimes what we say, in that Facebook post or whatever isn't always like how we really feel. So don't forget Google is your friend, Bing is your friend, whoever you want to use, DuckDuckGo. I mean, I don't care how you get there, but there are a lot of reputable solid good Disney reporters out there who will be fair and honest and let you know what is happening. And I hope that's what we gave you today. That's what we hope this whole podcast is about, is that it's information from people who are just really big fans of Disney. And but we're also high maintenance fans of Disney. Like we do want a good experience because we recognize how much money we're spending with Disney, right? Like, I mean, all of these things, like, we're just like you guys. Like, we understand like, all of that. So hopefully this conversation gave you some information, even if you're not going to Jollywood Nights, even if this is not something that you really have a lot of interest in, maybe just even understanding like how things can change and how things can work out. And in the future, you might want to try something. I will say, Teresa, I had this thought popped into my head earlier when you were saying like, what about this event did you like? And I was like, well, I like the vibe and whatever. And I think what it comes down to, what I like the most when Disney does things for us is when they give us the opportunity to be part of the show. And so when they, like with Run Disney, when they encourage the costumes, right? When Jollywood Nights, when they are encourage dress to your best and, you know, dress to impress or whatever, however they termed it. I think that's what I love because the community as a whole, we're a lot of really like really imaginative people who maybe can't be Imagineers, but you know, in our own little way, you know, we can have a lot of fun with things, and we get a chance to be kind of part of magic and part of what is happening. And I will tell you, Jollywood Nights has been my favorite, even more so than Dapper Days. I think I have really enjoyed scrolling through all the pictures that I've seen from what people have worn and what they dressed up as with Jollywood Nights because I felt like it was a welcoming enough experience that Dapper Days may be overwhelming and kind of scary for somebody who thinks that you have to be like a full cosplayer to pull it off. You do not. However, I feel like that's kind of the vibe you get because there are so many like professional like models that show up just blow you out of the where I felt like Jollywood was Dapper Days light, like was Dapper Days for people like me who just like put something together kind of last minute, but really felt good and really enjoyed my outfit and loved, you know, people giving me compliments on it, which they did, which was also very sweet. So I don't know. I think that's what it is for me. And that's like part of the Disney magic to kind of sum up this experience is more of that, more of things that like we as your guests can get involved with. And I think that's also why like the Halloween parties are so much fun for me because again, it's the same thing. You give me the chance to like participate in Disney, to like be part of the show. I'm all about that.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful, especially your point. I was thinking about like being Dapper Daylight. It's like
Hmm.
it's a good way to dip your toe in the water
Hmm.
if you're thinking about it. Like
Absolutely.
I do love Dapper Days. I just haven't been there like over those weekends.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for me, I was like, I did go all out with my outfit. I
It
had
was
a lot of fun
adorable.
with it. But yeah, so I think in some of times these events, you know, you get out of it what you put into it.
Hmm.
Not to say that, you know, again, we talked about some of the struggles. Like Disney had to put a lot more into it to be worth it as an event for other people. They started doing that, but I think who you're there with, kind of how you're approaching these events, when it does have a little bit of that interactive element to it, you know, you're going to have a better time if you're really leaning into that. So I think that's another thing to consider with this event. Again, not that you have to dress up, but if you're thinking about it, I do think you'll have a little bit more fun if you are going with the vibe that they're selling and kind of really putting your best glam foot forward.
Whatever that means to you. And we saw everything. We really did see. I mean, I was laughing because obviously, you know, my Swiftiness has taken over this summer. But I saw so many Taylor Swift like dressy things. Like I was like, oh, she could wear that to the Eras tour next year. You know, there was like a lot of glitz and glam on that level. There was like definitely old Hollywood looking glitz and glam, which was really cool to see. And then there was in betweens, and there was just some like holiday vibey stuff. Like it was all over the place. So the answer to what to wear to Jollywood Nights is there is no wrong answer. Wear whatever you are comfortable in, wear whatever works for you. However, if you want to step out of your comfort zone and you've always wanted a chance to do something or to try something new, I felt like this was a perfect event for all of that because outside of the rain, we had a great time. Like it was good from that aspect. Like we enjoyed dressing up and taking pictures. Again, is this event worth it? It's very subjective. Very subjective. If you want to put a dollar amount on it and compare it to like a theme park ticket where you have all day at Hollywood Studios versus only 4 hours at Hollywood Studios, maybe not dollar for dollar worth it. But if these specialty shows, if the specialty food, if the specialty photos, if walk on lines and not having to stand in any of those lines for all those rides is your jam, my jam, then maybe it is worth it for you. Maybe it is. So we can't answer that for you. We just hopefully gave you some information that might help you decide if you want to do this in the future.
Yes, and if you have any more questions about Disney Jollywood Nights or really any holiday offerings at the Walt Disney World or Disneyland resorts, you can email them to us at noguiltdisneypod@gmail.com. You can also come join us in our Facebook group, which is No Guilt Disney on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and join us each week on the No Guilt Disney podcast because, as Patty likes to say,
it is no fun to fangirl. My freak, my free coasters from Jollywood Nights alone. Bye, y'all. Have a good one.